YouTube or whatever platform you might be watching on in the future. Thanks for being here, but also just pause this if you need to, because you'll be watching this posthumously, possibly. So feel free to pause and also make any notes that you need to have and that sort of thing, because these do run slightly long. Any questions? Pretty obvious. So my name is Andrews. I am part of the Church of Witchcraft, and we're basically focused on revitalizing witchcraft under a flexible common practice. We're developing common narratives, we're developing a location for witches to sort of congregate within and do their witchcraft. Witches come in a lot of different varieties and forms, different paradigms and modalities. That being said, those are also, by the way, not just semantics, those are actually separate specific things. And then also within that, basically a witch uses witchcraft. Witchcraft is whatever your toolbox happens to be, right? So that witchcraft is going to look very different from witch to witch. Sometimes they might share a similar system or tradition, much like mine. So I do celestial witchcraft specifically. The other celestial witches that are also practicing with me have very similar looking toolboxes to that witchcraft. So their witchcraft looks very similar to mine, but still there's a lot of variety within those. So my role within the Church of Witchcraft, I'm the Hierophant. Basically, I'm the head that just sort of keeps things on the rails is basically the biggest goal that I have. In previous sermons that I've had, you also hear me talk about developing, producing thaumaturgic or theurgic atmospheres, right? We'll talk a little bit more about that. We're going to have to reference that in conversation with this. As a disclaimer, you should probably have watched theurgy and thaumaturgy sermons as well before you start looking at this one. They're all accessible, but just so you're aware that you're going to have, if you have any questions about what it is that we're talking about or why it works the way it does, those will give you more expansion on those topics specifically. So again, thank you very much for watching, and by all means feel free to email us, ask questions. You can get on our Discord and talk to us directly and ask all the questions that you want, or add part of the narrative too. So today we're going to be talking about how witches experience synchronicity and resonance as individuals and within groups. That's what I forgot. I did not bring my dictionary in. It's okay. I have it written down because I knew I was going to do something like that. So again, how witches experience synchronicity and resonance as individuals and within groups. Because how do you know your witchcraft is even working, or whatever it is you happen to be doing, right? What's the information that you need to tell you what it is that's happening and what you're doing is actually efficacious. Efficacious meaning effective, basically. Also, if you might want to grab a dictionary if you don't understand the words that I have, because a lot of them tend to be fairly large. So let's talk about defining what synchronicity even is. Synchronicity, or synchrony, which you'll see in the dictionary, is something that is happening at the same time. Moving or operating at the same rate, so if they're oscillating or turning around at the same rate, or spinning at the same rate. Identical periods, when things are occurring. So, all of us are watching this, and we're having a synchronous sort of experience, because we're all part of the sermon. This is a form of synchrony. Identical period and phase. So identical periods is when a thing happens. A phase is a specific change, right? So if you have two ice cubes and they're both melting at the same time, they phase change from solid to liquid, and they're also doing it at the same period. So period and phase are changing. This is relevant because it's a metaphor to understand how witchcraft sort of functions as well. There's a period of things that is happening and a phase change from one to the other, e.g. theurgy to thaumaturgy, or vice versa, a phase change within a specific period. This is how we're starting to get some of these definitions so we can have a better understanding of what we're talking about. Resonance. Resonance is the condition of a system of particles, but bear with me, condition of a system in which probability of a reaction is a maximum. So basically resonance means that one system, an entity of whatever system or machine is working, so a system of language, a system of people, a system of organized groups, like a church, for example, or a coven. These are organized systems, and the particles are basically the other witches that are around you, or the community that you happen to be within. And a probability of a reaction is a maximum. So the system is then going to have a probability of reaction, and it's going to be the most reactive or the least reactive of some iteration or another. Synchronicity and resonance. talk about these things, and I bring them up specifically because it's really important to understand, a lot of people just say, I vibe with that, or I resonate with that. What does it even mean? What does it mean to resonate or to vibe with something? This is why we're talking about it. When we say vibe, we're going to get to some of that over here, and we're going to cover several things. So I'm going to have to kind of move forward pretty rapidly because there's a lot of information. So when you're vibing or resonating, when you just know something, you're talking about intuition, right? But intuition relies on things like synchrony and resonance. These things together can provide some insight as to whatever intuition even means. So if you have an intuitive, oh, it's this card when I'm doing a pull for tarot, for example. Or, I don't know, I just need this crystal for some reason. Those are things that are intuitive. But why is it intuitive? And that intuition is then, of course, related to the synchrony as well as the resonance. These two things together are giving you some hint of how your intuition is going to function and why it happens the way it does. The indicators of synchronicity and resonance. Because it's not just so much as though we need to know the definitions, so we know how they function and what we're going to be looking for in general. What we're looking for within synchrony and resonance are the indicators. This relies back on, if you go all the way back for a few sermons, you'll get to Eyes of a Witch, Hands of a Witch, those sorts of things. The Eyes of a Witch were the observation component. What are we observing? I just said, be observant. But observant of what? I gave a little bit of a hint there, and then now we're going to get into exactly what I mean by what are we observing. And it's this synchrony and this resonance that I'm looking for within that observation, not just a physical or metaphysical change within my either environment or my own self or my change in phase and or, phase or period, right? I'm also looking at that observation of what my synchrony and my resonance is, right? So this is opening up and expanding that. We're going to get more specific there in a minute, but basically you're looking for what is synchronous and what is resonant within yourself, which tells you a little bit more about how your intuition functions. Witchcraft and most things I will approach, and it's a me approach, but I recommend this to a lot of people, is to use the scientific method. There's a lot of varieties of that, but we're just going to go with basically the Western world's variation of that, and they're going to be specifically, you have to ask a question, do some research, establish your hypothesis, what you think is going to happen, test that hypothesis, test what you think is going to happen, make an observation. So do the thing, then make an observation. Then you analyze what that observation even was, and then you can present your findings, right? Presenting findings would be writing in your book of shadows as an example. We're taking these scientific steps to sort of use that system to help understand what our witchcraft is even doing, whether or not that toolbox is functioning, or what effect it has. If it's not consistently occurring, then how can you predicate anything on something, right? If I do one set of actions and then something happens, can I replicate that? Replication is an important thing within the psych world, and as well as the scientific world. Psychological research essentially is moot if you can't replicate it. It just is this kind of bunk, because it's like, okay, you got to happen once. That could be up to probability, it could be up to any number of variables, different factors that might change that. So replication is a really important thing, and I would say the same thing is important within a testing of hypothesis. Can I make this replicate? Can I duplicate the same result multiple times? The next jump from that is then, can I make that duplication within my own witchcraft? Can that then happen with other people? And this is an important jump, right? Sometimes that might work, sometimes it might not. But that tells you what's working. And this is when you've heard in other sermons that have talked about this specifically, that sometimes your spells just stop working. Sometimes your witchcraft, the way you're doing it, the vehicle that you created to make and animate the witchcraft, however that's done, sometimes it just stops working. And if you don't have this kind of a framework where you went, oh, I see where that broke down, then you can't go back and then look at it and then make the alterations to reinvigorate your witchcraft. And this is where when people start getting into the whole, Sunday witchcraft isn't working, I'm not getting the intuition that I need. Why is it doing that, right? This is why we need the scientific method, so that you can pinpoint where it broke down or where it might have gone awry, right? That sequence will help you understand and work through those barriers that you might run into. So again, you're going to ask a question, research, establish your hypothesis or your theory of what's going to happen, test that hypothesis, make an observation, did it work, did it not work, analyze whatever you found, and then maybe present your findings or write them down or something. That's actually specifically what, I have several of these, but this Magic Field Log. Magic Field Log is basically my stream of consciousness, and this is where I'm doing all those scientific observations within my witchcraft. So this specifically is then my testing log, and after I'm done with this, once I've gone in here and I can replicate the results, then it goes into my Book of Shadows, because the Book of Shadows is a big to do because it's an artistic project for me, so that means I have to like write all the things down and be specific, so I need it to be tested, and not just, I'm gonna put whatever I need to in the Book of Shadows and I'm just gonna wing it. Some people do have their Book of Shadows is just this, and that's okay too. I wanted a little bit more of an artistic, formulated version of my Book of Shadows that I could know and rely on. But some people may just want this. They may just want to have a testing book, and this is arguably also a Book of Shadows. Grimoire, spells, of things that you work. So what is a Book of Shadows, so that we don't get totally off track here? A Book of Shadows is just your compendium of whatever your witchcraft is, basically. What spells you have, what rituals you have, what ceremonies, all of the things that comprise your witchcraft are within this spectrum. Often they were used with code because people didn't want to read them, and you'll come across the, I'll probably mispronounce this terribly, but Theban, for example, is the witch's alphabet. Which is kind of not a really historic thing, but you'll see things in runes, or you'll see things in codex, or you'll see things in that manner to hide whatever their spells are because they may not want to share those. And some people may not even want to write down this Book of Shadows, and that's okay too. But I feel as if you need to at least have some source that you're working through that you can look at and then spread out. It can't just be an oral-only intuitive sort of feeling thing. That's good to have, but without the other subsequent pieces, how can you make sure that's happening consistently? How can you remember everything? How could you remember, like let's say you're even 80-year-olds, elderly individuals, have trouble remembering anything. There's so much life they've lived that even if you have this oral sort of thing with witchcraft, and that's how you're remembering it, you're gonna forget stuff. Your brain is fallible, which brings me to a certain point. We are experiencing time linear as we've dictated it. And the reason I'm saying that is that your senses, physical senses that you have, the biological sense organs that you have, skin being one of the largest ones, is faulty. Really, really faulty. It's really hit or miss. And what I'm saying is that also there's a delay of about 1.2 milliseconds. Everything you're perceiving happened already. It takes time for your electrical signals to go, oh, a thing is happening. Within that tiny little iteration of time, things can get misdirected and get a little strange. And that therein is why we can't rely on everything that we have, because our senses are flawed. And that's okay. Just know that they're flawed, work around it. And really for me that means provide some aspect of forgiveness with my senses, because they're not going to be totally 100% correct all the time because of this delay. It's just a biological fact. Electrical signals take time to get from the sense organ and get processed and then have an experience about them. And that just takes time, and it can be flawed. So, keeping in mind our indicators of synchronicity and resonance, our scientific method, and some of these delays that we might be experiencing that are giving us a flawed representation of what our world, our reality, our experience is, we'll move on. And some of that delay is going to rely on our clair skills. So clair skills are a thing that come across many people. Some people are born with them, and we could argue and debate whether or not their scientific basis infinitum. So you could do it forever, right? Why are they happening? Are they metaphysical? Are they mystical? Are they supernatural? What are they? If they're senses, I would argue that they're not necessarily supernatural, because of the reason that I have a sense of a thing. That may not be reliant on a specific physical sense organ, but I'm obviously having them. So they can't be supernatural entirely, or they might just be in part supernatural, but they are happening and I'm experiencing them, and I'm natural, not supernatural, so then those must at least be in part natural skills, not just mystic random nonsense. Too many people have reported on them. Specifically, we have claircognizance. I'll just wander over here. Claircognizance, clairgustatory, or clairgustance, clairaudience, clairvoyance, clairsentience. Clair is the prefix of that is clear, or clear sense. Claircognizance, clear knowing. That clear knowing is something that I do, right? You just pick up something, or you know something has to happen, or you're just like, I have to go somewhere right now, and I just have to be in this location, I just know it. How do I know that? I have no idea. I just do. But because I'm a natural creature, I know that that has to be based in some real natural circumstance for that to occur. Clairaudience is being able to taste things, sense things, that sort of thing. Clairaudience was another one, which was like basically a scent thing that you get, from outside sources. These are how we detect things like, let's say pop like for example, if you start smelling, things like tobacco and you start smelling those things, they can be indicators of the metaphysical manifesting. Again, I'm not going to get into the debate of trying to figure out whether deities are real or where they come from, because we don't have enough time for that. Clairaudience is another really common one that gets reported very frequently. Clairaudience is actually pretty rare. I don't hear that a lot, but clairaudience is basically clear hearing, and it's that metaphysical, supernatural seeming sense of audio. You'll hear music playing, you'll hear ghosts or figures or entities, whether or not they're real, doesn't matter, but you'll hear these things. You'll hear instances of past or future or present, or beyond what is normal or baseline hearing. Clairvoyance is clear sight, I believe, if I'm remembering that, clear sight. Being able to see future, past, present. This is oracular, what the oracles do. So oracles of Delphi, they'll have that clairvoyance, the ability for beyond sight. And really, I think that you could even say, like, as uber audience or uber voyance, over sight. Clairsentience. Clairsentience has to do with, this is one that I'm weak on. Clairsentience, it has to do with it has to do with animism, I believe. So check me before you totally quote me on this. Please do your research. Do your research on all of this. Please disprove me, have arguments and debates about this. It helps me, helps all of us. Clairsentience is something knowing, right? The ability to share knowledge between individuals. It's about knowing that versus just claircognizance is I just know a thing about something. Clairsentience is we can share knowledge, or I can give knowledge, or I can receive knowledge from somebody else, or through any sort of medium. So the clair skills, there's plenty of them. You can look them up, research them, try them. You can try and escalate them, you can try and develop them. I would encourage all of that. And that would be, in my opinion, also part of a witchcraft toolbox, right? Witches doing witchcraft is trying to do this and feed into it. If there's one that that just comes naturally, just do more of that. I use claircognizance all the time. Like I was building the prayer kneeler, for example, and the prayer kneeler, I had no idea why I was building it. Just said, build the thing. So I went, all right, that is an example of claircognizance. I just knew I had to build it, I built the thing, and then now it's developed all this other subsequent stuff. Other senses that I don't have written up there are things like déjà vu. French translation, you again, is basically what it translates as. Déjà again, vu, you again. So it's an experience you are having again. I have some interesting ideas about that, but that's one of our senses. And this also revisits our electrical delays, right? So the electrical delays that we have, some of this might be coming because of this, that in-between liminal state that we have, because we have a delay in our electrical systems to tell us from our sense organs to our brain and processing and having an experience about it, this is where I think this falls into place. Similarly with witchcraft, witchcraft works, or witches in general, work within a liminal state. That liminal state, we work in in-between states. We naturally do that by just our senses being delayed like they are. And I think that in between there, I think that's where this stuff is happening, where we're able to access this because there's a state of beginning and no process, a state between that which is being sensed and then still not being sensed yet. It's somewhere between those states. It's superimposed. So you have state 1, I'm having experience. State 2, I'm not having experience. And then you have the initial, what's the word I need? The antecedent. To make that make more sense, I'm running out of board, but I'll write up here. So we have an antecedent. This is going to be a sense. So sense 1, sense 2. No experience and experience. And this branches into one of these two things. When this occurs, when you have an antecedent experience, sense of some sort, there's a delay that's going to be one of these two things. But there is a moment right there that is neither of those states. It is just a sense. Nothing has happened yet. It may seem super small, but I think this is where this is getting filled in, and then causing some of this stuff. to have no experience or an experience. Yeah?
But then you can't say that time is linear.
I disagree with time being linear myself as well. And I don't think time is linear. It's a whole other debate, but yes, I agree with you. Time being linear is a really difficult concept for me. Like, because just this alone tells us that time is non-linear. It goes somewhere, right? We're in our waking conscious minds, and the way we interact with society, time has to be linear. The time is a made-up construct anyways for us to basically organize our experiences in some manner or other, but really I think that we're all at the zero sum, right? So if we were losing this as a time experience, this is the zero sum point of all things that are happening simultaneously. They are happening and not happening and about to happen all at the same time. And that is what I think this is, specifically. And this is where witches work in this liminal state. I get to choose. The witch knows that they can choose within here how to do this stuff. And I'll get back to that in a second, but that's why. That's where I think our power derives from, our potency, our efficacy. Potency just means the ability or the impact, the sigma or the effect of the thing. What the hell is sigma again? Is sigma or this? I think that's sigma. Or sigma, no, that's epsilon.
I think something else. That.
Is this sigma? Or is that epsilon?
That's some, absolute some.
Okay. Well, my Greek is weak. It's okay. But my point being is that we are able to manipulate this space, and this is what witches do. They work in a liminal state. Not just this super, like, unbelievable thing where it's just like, it's either physical or it's metaphysical. It's not just that we work in between those things. We're literally working in between time and how we parse time. And this is really important for the Hermetic principles that we're going to get to in a minute. But back to our potency and efficacy. Potency, the impact, the sigma, the magnitude by which something happens, right? We are not able to, as far as I'm aware, we are not able to conjure up a firestorm out of our hands and then shoot that somewhere and like destroy a building. That would be like over the top magnitude of being able to do pyromancy. That would be, well, pyrurgy would be, I guess, the way I'd phrase that. Mancy just means divination, and so I wouldn't be casting a flame storm with a mancy. It would be urgy, but we'll get there in a minute. You can read my documents about that elsewhere. But that being said, that magnitude would be insane. We've never seen that. We've seen small variations of that. But notwithstanding, the magnitude by which you work is really important. This relates back to how peer-reviewed works happen and how we judge them. So we have that scientific observation, the magnitude of which something is effective, right? And that magnitude is about how negatively or positively correlated it is with something happening, essentially. And this is important because I want to also mention that we need to talk about not just our potency, but also our efficacy. Efficacy just means efficacious. Did it work or did it not work? Or did it kind of work? Those things are how we understand our efficacy. So potency, magnitude, the size of how big something is. And then the effect is how effective it was. Usually these two things are correlated. The more magnitude, the more efficacious usually. And this is why we have the observation that we do. Accuracy and precision is another really important conversation. Accuracy and precision. You can both be accurate and precise. Precise but not accurate, which would also mean the inverse is true too, accurate but not precise, right? Or you can be not precise and also not accurate. That would look like, I'll use our grid here, so if I was aiming here, right? If we get all these dots, this is accurate and precise. These dots are precise, but not accurate. Neither accurate nor precise. When we're debating or seeing how our scientific understanding of our witchcraft is going, these observations, these principles, we're looking to see how accurate and precise something's happening, to understand how powerful or potent it is and how efficacious it is, how much the effect is. So if we know that we're being accurate and precise, and we understand that there's an effect that's happening that's observable, and we see a potency, a magnitude, or size of a thing, then we know that that thing is working, whether that's a spell, ritual, ceremony, whatever it is. This is why you need to know what it is you're doing with it, right? So not just within spell work, right? I also need to add this accuracy and precision into the spell map, which is on our Discord. You can totally look that up. It is available as a general framework. But accuracy and precision also relies not just on spells, but also can be applied to ceremonies, right? If a ceremony is to recognize something and to do a certain thing and have everybody have an experience, then the end target is positive experience or some experience, right? More than what they had before. And so you know that that is your target. So if you were really precise and you're like, cool, nobody had an experience, but we totally did a ceremony, then you would be precise but not accurate, right? If you did both of those things, you're accurate and precise. Everybody had an experience and it meant something, right? You're seeing how these things can go together. You can apply accuracy and precision to other generalized practices. The same thing goes here with all of our Clair skills. You can see how accurate and precise it might be. And this accuracy and precision is going to tell you how much you're having an effect on your world, whether that's theurgic or it's thaumaturgic, right? Theurgy being egoless state and getting part of the all, and thaumaturgy being I'm affecting this, being the God self, broadly. Watch the 3 hours of videos on this, and also do your own research, because if you look into Gnosis, you'll see it. Theurgy and thaumaturgy. Being accurate and precise with our skills is going to help you understand where you're doing this, right? So bear those in mind when you're working with any of the witchcraft that you're doing, and use those in your toolbox. Theurgy and thaumaturgy I just briefly touched on, but you can apply. It's like I wrote this or something. I just talked about exactly what's on my list here. Apply accuracy and precision with the scientific method when you're doing any of your witchcraft, whatever witchcraft you're enacting, and then see how accurate and precise it is. If you're getting random results and it's nowhere, right? We have chaos and order, and if it's ordered or chaos, yeah.
Well, it's like fishing, right? You can have all the right tools and you can throw your line out there, but you might not catch the fish even though it's right there. And same thing goes with spell casting. You're still casting that out there, hoping that you'll achieve that result. However, it doesn't have to bite that hook that you use to all your tools with.
Right, and even more so, we'll go to an even more ridiculous level with this. So with all of these skills in mind, thaumaturgy, theurgy, your Clair skills, your witchcraft, the tools that you're using, you could be casting your fishing line, right? You're gonna go fishing in some place and you're like, there's the river, there's the fish, and then you do this, you go, whoop, nope, I'm just gonna cast into the forest. You can totally do that, but that is neither accurate nor is it precise, and they're not using the tools in any way, shape, or form that's actually conducive to actually fishing. Or if you're just like, I'm gonna go fishing, you take a shotgun, okay? Like, you're going to have very little fish left if you even actually manage to hit something. This is it's not precise, nor is it accurate, right? If I take a sniper rifle and I go and I shoot the fish, it's both accurate and precise because now I've got one fish, right? If I actually manage to hit anything, you'd be a pretty amazing sniper if you're able to do that. But that's the same thing with your spell work, right? Choose the right tool for the job. Know what your accuracy and precision is going to be to apply it to these things. That's how you'll know whether or not these are actually working. Whether your witchcraft is having potency and efficacy is by your accuracy and your precision. Relieving stress is another topic that we talked about early on. And relieving stress is, I get to know these things. Once I know these things, I have certitude. And I can say for certain that these things are going to happen with, an 86% probability or whatever it is, right? This gets a little bit into more of my behaviorism background. Just that I can see what behaviors are begetting things. If I keep seeing stuff and I have a high probability, usually if it's over 75%, it usually goes into my Book of Shadows. Usually. I have a much broader sense of when I'm going to have an inclusion. So find whatever percentage works for you, where your inclusion or exclusion rate, right? So if I have a high inclusion rate, so if it's like 90% effective and it has to work 90% of the time, then that is a very small inclusion window, right? You have a 10% error rate. 75% is like a 25% error rate. Like you can basically miss a quarter of this and you could just still call it good, which honestly is probably where you want to be because witchcraft is a little wonky. You're talking about a leap of faith, like we're talking about Kierkegaard, of course, that you're taking a leap of faith. Nobody can really debate you. You're on your own, but that means that you have to take accountability for that because nobody else can prove or disprove your leap of faith. If I'm taking a leap of faith that says astrology works or is applicable, I need to know if it's accurate or precise. How else am I going to do that? Nobody else can tell me that. I have to know how to do that. So I use the scientific method. I use this accuracy and precision. I use my senses to do that. This is an enhancement of the eyes of the witch, the observation we're doing. This is the observation that we're doing. So relieving stress is able to know where you're at with what you're doing, right? Knowing these things will help relieve that stress because now I have a plan. I have an idea. I can point to a thing and go, that's how it worked almost every time. My accuracy and precision was super high. I saw some potency that occurred, and I have an efficacious nature to it. Something occurred. So for example, if they're doing a spell to attract something, how often does that same sequence of behaviors, that ritual or that spell, get the same result, right? And if you get if you're like, I'm going to go ahead and do some attractive thing for, I don't know, more knowledge, and then for some reason you get like raccoons, and you get a plethora of raccoons in your backyard, that's great. Not the thing you were trying to go for. You were very precise, but not accurate, right? And this is that observation, is knowing that. I did have a mentee recently ask me, because I was explaining that astrology may be predicated on principles of magnetism. It's a very long story, I'm not going to get super into it. Basically, using a scientific approach to why planets interact with us in the way that we do. Because I don't think that astrology is only observation, I think that it actually has scientific stuff, which is going to get us into our Hermetic principles here in just a hot minute. But that being said, they asked me, they said, well, if you have a science behind it, you know why it's working, you can use instruments to prove this thing. You can say, yes, without a doubt, this magnetic field impacts the vibration of your molecules. We can prove it. We can't, I'm just saying this is a hypothetical. This is that same scientific method that we were talking about. I have a theory, I have an idea of how I'm going to go about it, that hypothesis. I'm going to test that, observe what I see, and then see if I can do that and have accuracy and precision with that, and then we're off to the races, right? If there's no correlation, then that's also more information that I didn't have before. Because now I can just say whatever I want. It to be like, yeah, astrology is affected by magnetism. Who's to say that's wrong or right? I can't prove anything, I can't point to anything, I can't say it's accurate or precise. I'm just making random claims, and you can do that all day long, but I want you to be accountable. The church wants people to be accountable, and that's hard, right? Because sometimes you're wrong. A lot of times you're wrong. I'm wrong. People are wrong, and that's okay. And by wrong, I don't mean an ethical judgment. I mean wrong as in mistaken, or doesn't really understand, or didn't have all the facts, and needs to adjust. And that's one of the principles in the Church of Witchcraft, too, is to make sure that we're adjusting to new information. There's no Bible of witchcraft, it doesn't exist. We have to go off of what we're seeing. We have to look at this accuracy and precision. We have to look at what is happening, what our feedback is, what that observation is, to be the best organization we can for everybody who's connected. So they said, it's this science thing, right? You have these tools that proves this thing. That's a hypothetical. Does that remove the divinity from it? And I went, hold on, I have to think about that. I'm not sure. I answered it, it doesn't. Input, output, input, transformation, output. The input, scientifically proven changes for magnetism and vibration of molecules, okay? That's the scientific, assume that's true. The transformation then is my emotions about that thing. My emotions, my moods and motivations, like I talked about in religions. How we define, one of the inventories of how we define what religion even is, or if a thing is religious. That transformation, those moods and motivations that I have, are still informed by a scientific principle, but that transformation is my divinity. It doesn't remove the divinity, it just gives us further understanding of the genesis of the thing that it happened, right? So it being scientifically explained, even if we could explain scientifically how tarot happens, or why pendulums work, or any of those things, it doesn't necessarily remove the divinity from it. It still has that in there. The divinity requires that leap of faith, that the scientific principles that are happening that make astrology work, assuming it's magnetism, that in and of itself is saying, I'm taking a leap of faith that those moods and motivations are real, and ergo, it's still divinity, even though I have a scientific understanding of that. So that doesn't remove the divinity. But I had to think it through. It was a really good question, because I didn't know how to answer that, honestly. I was thrown for a loop there for a second. So relieving stress is that knowing about these things, using the spell map that exists now in the Discord. There's like 6 pages of basically how you do a spell. Knowing these things gives us some certitude, some thing that we can actually latch onto and go, this is a thing that happens. Knowing these facts and figures about your accuracy and precision and all of the things we just talked about provides a reduction of stress, because then you know how to handle that. I've referenced the story a number of times, but I was asked at one point in time, what do I turn to in times of crisis? That has evolved over time, and I didn't know how to answer that several years ago, and I do have an answer now. I rely on my own potency and efficacy based on the accuracy and precision I have from these skills that I've been working on. I know them to work. I have seen them work. I have anecdotal and provable evidence to those things, and I rely on that for when I get into times of crisis. So these are how I'm finding what I turn to in times of crisis. Didn't know that then. I just said, witchcraft. And what does that even mean, right? That's just nonsense, because witchcraft is just tools, right? So what do? I turn to tools? I mean, you might as well just open your toolbox with craftsmen in them and just be like, oh, I'm having a crisis. And then you look at your toolbox, that doesn't really help me any. That doesn't tell us anything. This stuff does tell us something. Unknown topography events. People that have autism, for example, really like consistency. And when that consistency gets disturbed, they freak out. And that's normal, right? Because they need to know, because there's so much going on for them that they're, overwhelmed with their senses and all of that stuff, or whatever else is going on for them. And I can speak to this because it's basically my job to do this, but essentially they're overwhelmed and they need to know and trust that that thing is going to be consistent. Why do they always eat saltine crackers? Because they're the exact same texture, consistency, taste, flavor, across the board. Every saltine is the exact same. That's why they eat them so much, because they're simple, because they're precise and accurate. The saltines are precise and accurate, but a blueberry is not, right? Blueberry could be bigger, juicier, wetter, drier, old, whatever, right? And that's why they tend to not eat things like fruits, because they are disturbing, because it's not the sequence that they understand. And it throws everything off into chaos, and that is trying to understand how they interact with the world. Similarly, knowing what you're doing, how your spells work, what the efficacy is, what your potency is, gives you that reduction of stress, because you can trust it to be consistent, and you know for a fact that it's trustworthy because you've done your work. You did the scientific method. You looked at these things, you applied it, and you can go, I can trust that this is going to happen. I can trust that my tarot is always going to give me insight about my internal self. And whenever I read for others, I know that it's going to work for others because I did this, knowing what I know. And so because I know that there's accuracy, precision, potency, and efficacy within my tarot, I can trust and turn to it because I can consistently replicate the results, and other people can also corroborate those same results. And so I use it. Similarly, apply that within your own witchcraft. Individual synchrony. Connecting to your first altar is really important. So basically the individual synchronicity, how we learn things about ourselves, what's synchronous about ourselves, the individual synchrony or resonance. Connecting to your first altar is really important. What resonates with you, what's synchronous for you is going to be really important to how your first altar is going to function, what it's going to do. Relies on some of this stuff too, right? Since I do a lot of claircognizance, I don't do a lot of clairgustance, why would I put that into my altar? There'd be no reason for me to do that. It doesn't assist me in what I'm doing. Go with your strengths, use your intuition, that blend of synchronicity as well as the resonance within that category. Increasing or decreasing your health is really important, physical or metaphysical. The act of devotional acts in that of themselves are helpful because they consistently, that's the health of your metaphysical self, your divine self, if you will, and doing more of those devotional acts, being consistent with what you're doing, knowing what these things are. That is the consistency that you're looking for. That is the health maintenance of your own divine self. Similarly, you can do this with your physical self. If you're just eating a whole bunch of, hot food from McDonald's, you're probably going to get super sick. And that's not really great for you. And then that's going to take away from stuff. If you're too busy worrying about your health and not dying because you're overweight or obese or whatever is happening, and you can't do that, it's shutting these things down. Because then how are you going to be anywhere near your divinity? Because you're focused on not dying physically. So taking care of your health is part of your first altar because you need that clarity. Similarly, when I decided to abstain from drinking, like almost 3 years ago, all of my senses got cranked up to like 11, and it was still very difficult. I deal with the light the way it is because you need to be able to see my eyes, and it's just super weird because you're just staring at me, and it's already weird because we're virtual, so I take my sunglasses off in this, but it constantly causes like a low-grade headache if I don't have sunglasses on, and that only came after I removed alcohol from my diet, and that caused some subsequent things. And of course, this is an obvious thing, but substances, legal, illegal, whatever it is, are going to impact you, and all of this stuff is going to be impacted by how your health is in general, both physical and metaphysical, or the divine self. You will see a reduction or improvement in potency, efficacy, accuracy, and precision if you're not taking care of yourself. If you're healthy and you're taking care of your divine self, you're taking care of your physical self, you'll see an increase in this stuff. It will just happen. I'm not sure clearly exactly why that happens, I'm just aware that it does. And I think it has to do with making some of that like supernatural highway almost, right? The more frequently I've traveled this road, the more consistent it's going to be. It's the
The
same.
alignment.
Hmm?
The alignment.
The alignment, right? The manifestation, in part. Which, yep, it's coming up. You'll also see often in individual synchrony and resonance, you'll see an inexplicable assistance and hindrance. You'll just go around your world and just be hard to do stuff, or it'll be really easy to do stuff, miraculously, air quotes, miraculously. And maybe it is miraculous, I don't know. We haven't defined miracles. We've only defined roughly synchronicity, as well as resonance, intuition, at least this round. But miracles probably are from some sort of divine sense of some entity or other, whether it's through you or not through you, it doesn't really matter. You could take it a lot of different ways, but miraculously, there's just things that will happen that will be helpful. I needed new tires, for example, on my car. Randomly. I don't know why. It just happened. Could be a whole sequence of events. All of Coloradans that file taxes just got the exact number, the exact dollar amount that I needed to get tires. That is synchrony. That's resonance. I don't know why that works. It just did. It just happened that way. I haven't really rationalized, but I see things like that consistently over time. So similarly, you're looking for those observations in yourself. This has to do with the part of the indicators of your synchronicity. You're looking for these things. This is the not spell babysitting, right? We're not focused, we're not obsessing over that, we're not fixating on it, but we're aware, kind of in the periphery, of, is this happening? What's happening? What's occurring? Being in tune with yourself. That's this precision and accuracy. That's these senses. And those are relevant to what your witchcraft is and how you function. So this inexplicable, hindrance and stuff. For example, there's a lot of times when I tried to go buy a house, for example, and I just got stopped at every single turn. Everything that could go wrong just went wrong. Inexplicable hindrance. I don't know why it didn't work. For some reason, it didn't happen. This also is non-linear in time. So there are things that I suddenly will be doing. Like, for example, I was doing prayer and I started incorporating that, and I was like, I don't know why I'm doing that, but I feel really good doing it, so I'm going to do that because I'm seeing precision and accuracy, I'm seeing an increase in potency and efficacy, so I keep doing it. Since I keep doing it, then the next thing that I had from that increase is that I went, well, that's really working. And then I did some more research and I came across theurgy and thaumaturgy, ergo gnosis. Turns out I was doing theurgy without knowing I was doing theurgy. I just happened to do it right before I learned about it. So that being said, sometimes your intuition, that claircognizance, that clairsentience, when you just know stuff, listen to it. It's important to listen to that. If you're not listening to it, you're going to miss out on those opportunities, and then you're not synchronizing. But things do not necessarily occur in a linear format. Just like I accidentally was doing alchemy without knowing I was doing alchemy. I kept having dreams about peacocks and hummingbirds for no apparent reason. I have this internal transformation going on. 3 months later, I'm reading The Black Toad. Turns out that's about transformation, and I was going through a transformative period. Again, non-linear experience. I don't know why that's happening, I just know it is. It's occurring. And I think that liminal phase is part of that, is that since it's non-linear, time is non-linear, at least we're running with that supposition, then witches working in a liminal state mean they can work in any iteration of time because it's non-linear, and they're working in a halfway state, basically, and they're pulling from anywhere in that liminal state. So I think that's why, or at least my initial beginnings theories of why I'm pulling from, why I'm experiencing a piece of knowledge and then find it later. And this is that inexplicable assistance instead of hindrance. For some reason, I'm getting it. I don't know why. But that's the same thing that you're going to be looking for in your observation models. Further on, manifestation. Let's define manifestation real quick. So, we're going to use the idea to show or demonstrate plainly, evidence and proof. This stuff. Evidence and proving whatever it is you're manifesting. Focus on one aspect and you'll get more of it, just like I was saying. You'll see more of those things happen in your life. Inexplicable assistance, inexplicable hindrance. The condition of a system, the resonance factor of your own self. The conditions of resonance. So we were talking about how a system is impacted by resonance, how everything is working in harmony, basically. You can increase and decrease that resonance as well. And it's the condition of a system. And that system, I think, is beyond just particles. You're talking also explicitly that I'm able to do this within the system of metaphysical stuff, the system of reality, the system of experience. And then the particles, the events and things that are unfolding and occurring by spell work, by this precision and accuracy. I can influence that and change those things, just as you can have vibration principles. I'm trying to see where we're going to get to our, oh yeah, we're getting down there. All right, so manifestation, that same ability to change resonance. And thinking about this, and this is another thing that I want to test eventually, is that I want to see if you have an effect. You take one reading of a subset of molecules within your body that resonate at a certain frequency, whatever that happens to be, eat more healthy food and less healthy food in both conditions, and see if there's a change in that resonance signature. I suspect there is, I can't prove it, but I definitely think there's something there. That being said, I can influence the rest of my world the same way by manifestation principles, to show plainly with evidence. So when I'm using manifestation, I'm affecting the system of reality or experience that I'm having, and then I'm adapting and changing that, just like I would be changing and adapting my own resonance within my body, within those molecules that we know can be affected by various things, such as food, such as experiences in time, and what have you. And this refers to our thaumaturgy and theurgy polarity as well. I can do more of this, which begets more of our thaumaturgy. Polarity over duality every single time, and I will say that till the day I die. I'm going to have a really long epitaph on my gravestone, though, because I got all these sayings and all these ideas. That's why I had to write a book. Anyways, the ability to change this polarity is the manifestation. If I'm working for more people, and I'm working within a system that I'm helping people, then this is affecting your system. Just if this metaphysical concept is way too hard, imagine if you volunteer at an organization or don't volunteer. The people that you're helping, you're influencing them. The same thing is true. That is your resonance of that, your manifestation of that principle. That's happening. You can visibly see that. What we're talking about is a little bit more abstract, which is how you get witches doing witchcraft within liminal states, and then proving that through your accuracy and precision. So pay attention to where you are in your polarity stream. Where are you at here, right? More ego, more physical, less ego, right? Whether it's more order or whether it's more chaotic. So with that, the group synchrony. So first we talked about our individual synchrony. Our group synchrony is how do witches work within groups? What happens in covens, spiritual groups? It doesn't even matter what it is. Any groups that happen. And you do a little bit more research to give you exacting and provable stuff. I'm working on it. But to be fair, the group synchrony that you're experiencing, in my coven, what we experience is that we just suddenly have clear sentience. We just know shit about each other for no apparent reason. We know when something's going on with them. We can feel when they're misaligned, or when they're going through trials and tribulations, or they're withdrawing. And not just witches can do this, like everybody does this. I think that we just do it to a higher extent because we're aware of the same millisecond change that's going on here, and so we're manipulating this, and we can base that proof on our accuracy and precision, right? Arguably, that's more of the, you start getting into a theurgy, thaumaturgy argument, and I'm not going to get into that debate, but basically, when you're within a group, you start knowing each other, you start feeling each other, you start understanding things, you have similar dreams, similar places. It's that group coherence that occurs, group truth, right? So some of these mystery schools that withhold their stuff, they're not talking about that because they have to be accountable. I can't just make random theater up and just say, this is happening, and have no basis on that. And that's why we take the idea of being really open, because then it forces us to be accountable and start thinking about these things and whether or not this is actually happening. You can see this physically speaking in terms of menstrual cycles. That aligns for whatever reason, it just does. You get a whole bunch of women together and then menstrual cycles start aligning. They just do. Why it happens, I'm not really sure. I don't know if it could be a lot of different things. I suspect that it has to do with hormone changes, subtle shifts in intent, the scent of things. I think that people are picking up on that, and I think that they're hyper attuned to that, and then they start syncing. I think. Would it be way off on that? Am I sort of in my wheelhouse, I think?
Okay. Good.
Try to be as respectful as possible. But that, I think, is not just a mystical thing that just magically happens. It's like, oh, we just put a whole bunch of women together, and they just suddenly start doing it at the same time. It's like, I don't think that's accurate. I think it's based on other things that we're not considering, and we're calling that intuition, right? And yeah, I think that breaking that down, you could just call it intuition or some sort of judgment call if you really want to, but I don't know why it works. I think that also is true. So at least it's true in a physical sense, at least in one iteration. That must mean that it's true in other iterations and not just a physical one. It could also be metaphysical. Weak argument, but I think you get where I'm going with that. So that group coherence and truth is really important. When you start connecting to other witches, like we do within the Church of Witchcraft, there's a lot of that synchrony that just starts happening, and we start resonating at the same frequency, and then we start doing things together, and then we start seeing an increase in potency, efficacy, precision and all of the stuff that we've been talking about. There's just an uptick in all of that, and everybody is doing this in an anecdotal sort of way. They're just like, I don't know, my spells are suddenly really effective. And I was like, well, there's a whole bunch of us around that are doing this thing, and we're carving that same road together, right? Or that road to metaphysical, or road to the theurgy and the thaumaturgy, we're making that channel stronger by the more of us that are doing it at the same time. And that group coherence, that group synchrony is what you're seeing, and that is going to be evidenced by all of the increase in the things we've been talking about. Foucault is a philosopher, just a random guy that I was wanting to mention. He talks about the pressures of systems. The panopticon is basically a big circular thing. Hang in there with me. So the panopticon is a big circular jail with a central pillar that has one guard that can watch the entire thing. But the guard's not always there. And this is important because for whatever reason, the prisoners can't see the guard. They don't know if they're there. They just have a supposition that the guard is there, even if he's not there, and then they behave in a certain way based on that system. Similarly, the group coherence that we're experiencing in the church, there's a pressure that's happening, right? There's an expectation of our own our accountability, right? Our accountability as a witch, as part of the congregation, or whatever that is to continue to hoe that road, right? And that's part of it, is that we're making that happen, and that pressure from that system is helping us inform us of that accountability. That group coherence in truth comes in because we're implying accountability in a state that wasn't necessarily accountable. If you just come up to me and you say, and I ask you, hey, what kind of practice do you do? What practices are you using in your witchcraft? Just that enforces by proxy, essentially, that you have to be accountable. Yeah, I do tarot. Cool. What does that look like? Well, now you have to answer a whole bunch of questions. Is it 3 cards, 10 cards, 1 card? You just throw them up in the air. Are you using a tarot system? Are you using a deck of cards? Are you using twigs? Are you using bones? Whatever that is. But then it forces accountability just by virtue of asking the question. So just by virtue of the church being in existence in a formed state requires accountability for us to be able to do precise, accurate stuff, to increase that potency and efficacy. But the benefit to that is that it increases those things. And so that's the benefit to that. Don't run away from the accountability, drive towards the accountability, because that provides an increase in your potency and efficacy overall. Intuition, claircognizance, sudden and supernatural knowing, or acute insight. So intuition is a blending of all of those aspects, right? And I think that it's also not just a metaphysical thing. You're taking in a lot of things that we're not necessarily aware of, right? There's a lot of background information that we're gleaning from the environment that we're not necessarily aware of. What things smell like, what things sound like, what sound. For example, if you're in a building and you suddenly hear everything go silent, you're gonna freak out and start wondering what's going on. Pretty obvious thing, right? Like if you're in a coffee shop and suddenly everybody's quiet, you should probably freak out because that doesn't normally happen, right? You have psychology thinking about it, it's a schema of how things are supposed to work, the script of how behavior is supposed to be in certain areas. A coffee shop is supposed to be noisy. You're supposed to hear sounds and things of that nature. And if suddenly everything goes silent, everybody's staring at you, you might want to start doing some stuff because that should be very alarming for you. Similarly, this intuition is part of that. You're taking in a lot of information that you're not necessarily aware of. The hum of your computer that you're probably watching this on, or your phone, or the feeling of the electrical interference between you holding your phone. You have an electrical field, your phone has an electrical field. There has to be some sort of interaction if the two are close together, right? So even that you may not be necessarily aware of. Biohackers, for example, will install magnets. They'll make incisions in their fingertips. They'll put in magnets, and it helps them sense magnetic north, a new sense, an entirely new sense. I'm not advocating you do this. I'm just saying as an example. They totally do this. Look it up, watch the news, make your own decisions. You're autonomous people. But they do install these magnets, and they get a sense of magnetic north. They just have a sense of where things are. They know that this is also a problem when their body tends to reject magnets, because you probably shouldn't put foreign objects in your body without a doctor or some sort of professional doing this, just side note. But when that gets removed because of whatever reason, because it got infected or whatever, they remove it, they have a sense of loss of magnetic north. They can no longer feel it, but they're aware that sense has suddenly erased itself. So we can even add new senses to our body that we didn't have prior. I don't know who else was born with knowing where magnetic north is, other than pigeons. Pigeons are robots, they're not real. So that sense can be evoked from here, or rather evinced. So synchronicity and resonance begets intuition. Challenge it, think about it, all of that stuff. Still good on time?
Yeah, I got like 3 minutes.
Whoa! We're getting there. We got so much more to go. Let's see here, how do I get this even? So there's an empathic entanglement within groups. You're feeling each other and you're having an intuitive experience of a group member's emotion, whether it's individual or group. You may be experiencing a group emotion, so all of you might be experiencing sadness, joy, whatever, and that's where ritual and ceremony comes in. This is where we get to our hermetic principles from the Kybalion specifically. This guy, this book, the Hermetic Kabbalah. Hermetic philosophy is a long story, but basically we have 7 principles: rhythm, polarity, gender, bear with me, cause and effect, mentalism, vibration, and correspondence. Rhythm is about how things move, the sequence between thaumaturgy and theurgy, the flow between these two states, or any state, right? Polarity is the theurgy, thaumaturgy. This is your polarity. The rhythm is the movement between these things. Your gender is about combining your male and female aspects. They're not one or the other, you're not just one of these things, you're balancing the 2 of these things. That goes back to our polarity as well as our rhythm. Cause and effect, something begets another thing. Using our scientific method, using this kind of knowledge, you're going to get a better idea of what your cause and effect is. Mentalism, best quote ever. Everything is mental. It's in the book, it's great. Everything comes from your mind, everything is generated from your mind. Also, it's flawed, so just be wary when you're making that claim. Your vibration is the principle of things, how they vibrate, how they move. And it has to do with sound, it has to do with this and what we do spells. Because what's sound? You're vibrating your vocal cords to make words that have some semantic and syntactic meaning. That's vibration. You're changing the world by your spells, by your vibration. That's this vibration that we're talking about. The vibration between these things during a rhythm and polarity and that movement. Your correspondence, one thing begets another thing, right? We get more theurgy, we get more thaumaturgy, and vice versa. The more that we work together in groups, the more we see more correspondence. We vibrate together, we see more of that. We create more things for our mind and being aware of our ability to liminally change states. And then we have a gender, this blend of things that we're coming together. Same thing if we take male, female, arbitrarily, these 2 things are on the same scale, right? So the idea of polarity within this is also there. Your rhythm is that movement, again, like I was saying. Last card. Good, I got through all of it. So mentalism, the all is mind, the universe is mental. Correspondence, like with like, similar, analogous, or equal, right? Vibration, frequency, or movement of the physical or metaphysical. Polarity, these are your basically transmuting here. You're going to be transmuting from this thing, right? It's important to transmute one experience to another experience, and that comes back into your correspondence. Your rhythm is the equilibrium and the flow between your polarity. Correspondence, causation, or correlation are within cause and effect, how things work together. And then gender is those male and female qualities, or the 2 polarities that are being blended into one. So it's not affirming that there's male and female binary only, it's just saying that you're taking 2 sides of polarity and then mixing those 2 together. The more you do that, you get more of the 0-point accuracy and precision. You can also do that through ordered theurgy or chaotic theurgy, or ordered thaumaturgy or chaotic theurgy, thaumaturgy. This is where contemporary witchcraft stems from, is our ordered thaumaturgy, in the effort of bringing these 2 things closer to that 0 sum. You're doing that through these senses, through these principles, through this liminal state. And that's how you're deciding on synchronicity and resonance overall. This is what you're looking at and what you're trying to develop and work within that state so that you can start melding these principles together. So knowing what that spell map is and reviewing that, that's on our Discord, and also looking at what theurgy and thaumaturgy mean to you and whether or not it's chaotic or ordered, is going to help you inform how your witchcraft is moving. And that precision and accuracy is going to increase with the potency and efficacy. And working within a group, like a church or a coven or whatever spiritual circle you might be in, is part of developing that together. Because all of you, if you're all doing these 7 things, and I'm not saying these are the only things, just in this instance, if you're doing all 7 of these things together, there's a far bigger transformation that's occurring because there's more of that rhythm between those states, right? If more than one person is trying to move between these states and keep up this equilibrium and flow, and you have like 500 people doing this, don't you think that might have a much grander effect? Just saying, that might be something you want to consider. So work on your precision and accuracy, invoke that scientific method, work on your claircognizance skills, be aware of those things, look for that synchrony and resonance, and then rely on those 2 things in building your own intuition together. But thank you for watching. I don't want to go on way too much longer for everybody who's watching that, because these are always way too long, but please feel free in the comments down below, how do you experience synchronicity, resonance in your own life? What intuition do you have? And do you see any of these things within your own group or within your own practice, whether it's solitary or otherwise? We'd love to see that down below. Feel free to get on Discord and share those as well, and we'd love to see you at the next sermon. Thanks again.
Yay.